Hey everybody, welcome to another fun movie in the Bald Move Pulp feed. This one is 1999's Galaxy Quest, and we have a singular individual to thank for the production of this podcast, Ann Merin, who is a giant lifelong Star Trek fan, it turns out, as we're going to find out in her dedication, and who recently had us watch Chaos on the Bridge, which was a highly entertaining documentary about the first 3 seasons of Star Trek. She's back with Galaxy Quest, which is, among other things, a loving tribute to the cheesy kind of science fiction films of the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and their fans' passionate relationship with same. It's a great movie. I've seen this, at least a half a dozen times over the years. Saw it, I think, twice in the theaters when it came out. It's a lot of fun. Jim, what did you think of this movie?
I'm glad you mentioned that it's a love letter, because I feel like the best parodies are always love letters to the source material. And this is no exception. This is an excellent parody, in my opinion. I haven't seen maybe a more modern parody or take on Star Trek: The Orville, although this movie kind of makes me want to go watch it, just because I'm feeling, between Chaos on the Bridge and this, I'm feeling that nostalgia kick.
And watching all the Star Trek we've been doing in our personal life. Yeah.
Right. We've been watching Star Trek: The Next Generation. And I feel like the people who made this really love Star Trek, and they're just looking to have a little fun with the franchise.
Yeah.
And as a Star Trek fan, a fan, mostly of Next Generation, but also very much of the original series, I felt like I was in the Star Trek universe with maybe a different crew on a different ship at times in this movie. And it's sillier, but honestly, is it that much sillier than the original series?
I've seen Spock's brain. I know how silly Star Trek can get. I've seen the first season of Star Trek: The Next Generation. It's not blameless, for sure.
Yeah.
It's funny because this is a spoof and parody, but not quite. It's a really inventive framing device, because you think of Spaceballs, which I enjoy, but it's got its limits. It's essentially a lot of sight gags and like, when the Star Trek or Star Wars does this, isn't it funny? And we're gonna make it silly, and there's not a whole lot of connective tissue. I mean, this is a fucking narrative.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen Galaxy Quest, the framing device is that 20 years after Galaxy Quest, this storied science fiction cheesy production that starred all these actors who were tragically typecast into the roles, they're now doing the con circuit and going to all the Galaxy Quest conventions and making personal appearances in character and kind of like hating life. And it's roughly based on a lot of broad strokes of how the original crew of the Enterprise felt about Bill Shatner, for example. And then as the first act turns into the second, aliens, like this is borrowing a structure from Contact, have observed our the television signals we've been beaming into deep space, and are so impressed with the commander of this NSEA protector and his daring do and his skilled diplomacy and his tactical genius, recruit him to helm a replica of the ship that they've built, not knowing, because their race is built entirely on honesty and integrity, and they can't conceptually think of dishonesty and lies, not realizing that these are just actors. And the conceit of the movie is these, like Bill Shatner has to become Commander Kirk or Captain Kirk, or this alien race is going to die. And also, since he's on the ship, he's going to die too. Mm-hmm. So, and it's got, so that gives it a lot of like poignancy, because I think that the engine that makes it work is like there's a little bit of the feeling you feel as a fan when your heroes let you down. Like, if William Shatner says something shitty about your fandom on Saturday Night Live, or if Leonard
Twitter.
Nimoy writes, or on Twitter, or Leonard Nimoy writes a book, says I am not Spock, where he repudiates his role and kind of chides the fandom. That sting you feel, I mean, that's what makes this engine, that's what makes this movie go. It's that times a million, because now it's like, if all of Earth was relying on Bill Shatner to actually be Kirk, and you find out that he's actually kind of a bloated, washed up has-been. Oh shit, what are we going to do? And there's a lot of I think interesting stuff, that the fact that the kind of crew hates his guts because he's a diva and he's soaked up all the spotlight and he kind of takes them for granted. And the fact that what if the actors needed encyclopedic fan knowledge of the franchise that they don't give a shit about? What if, like, one day, like my Star Trek technical manual was able to save Patrick Stewart's life? They have moments like that, and they're all great and all part of a narrative, which elevates it, I think, above your average spoof or a piss take at a franchise.
Yeah,
So,
that's what makes it really feel like the love letter, right? It's people who have a deep understanding of both that comes from having watched the show, but also having been fans of it for so long and being entrenched in, that community and that culture. You can tell that these people are Star Trek fans, not just people who were hired to write a spoof of Star Trek.
And what's interesting, maybe we should, I don't know, maybe we should let Ann Merin chime in here with her dedication, and then we can talk a little bit. From here on out, we already talked to Conceit, and we both love the movie. If you haven't seen it, you should go see it. You can buy it for $5 on Amazon right now. But let's read her dedication, and we can get into spoilers and talk a little bit more, because, man, you're right. Like, I didn't even know how many homages and inside jokes and Easter eggs were packed into this movie. And then researching and reading about it since watching it this most recent time, like, I just couldn't believe it. Like, these people really do love this source material and know a hell of a lot about it. Anne says, I went to my first Star Trek convention at the tender age of 8. My older brother had somehow convinced my parents that a celebration of a show that's no longer on the air was a once-in-a-lifetime experience not to be missed. I remember walking among the comic books and the tribbles covering the folding tables, running up and down the length of a carpeted ballroom of whatever New York City hotel had agreed to host this strange happening. It was a year before the release of Star Wars, and science fiction conventions were still a rarity. I recall waiting near one of the merchandise tables while my brother selected a model of the Enterprise he would later build at home. We had... Are you a stranger to building Star Trek models, Jim? Because I've constructed at least 3 separate Enterprises.
Oh, damn. I haven't done that many, but I've definitely tried. I think I tried a Defiant once. I don't know.
I did a 1701A, which is the movie, the movie version of the Enterprise, and then 2 Ds, which is the classic next generation model.
Yeah.
One, I went all out. I did LED lighting and everything. The nacelles is pretty fucking...
Where is... I've never seen
slick.
that. I've been to your house.
Well, my sister snuck into my room when she was about 7 years old and broke the thing, just wanting to play with it. God. I wanted to separate the... Oh, my God. I'm still salty about it. Damn you, Val. Stay the fuck out of my room. Anyway, we had agreed to arrive early to beat the crowds, but now the place was filling up. As I waited, tightly gripping my mother's hand and feeling completely lost in a sea of adults, I noticed a familiar-looking woman sitting at a nearby booth trying to catch my attention with a warm, comforting smile. I smiled back, grateful for the encouragement, and even at my young age, I was vaguely aware of the effort it must have taken to notice a small, slightly stressed-out child. The woman, Nichelle Nichols. From that moment, and for so many others, I am a lifelong Star Trek fan. That kind of meaningful experience between fan and art is the inspiration for the 1999 DreamWorks film Galaxy Quest, which can be best described as a love letter to sci-fi fandom, and more specifically to Star Trek fans, Trekkers or Trekkies, depending on which term you find offensive.
Don't get it wrong. Mixed company can be dangerous.
I feel like Trekker was the affectionate term until the Trekkies documentary come out, and I feel like, the fandom's kind of like a little less constipated nowadays. Like Star Trek is big beloved business worldwide. It's not so much a niche nerdy thing. So we've relaxed a little bit. My husband and I stumbled across this film shortly after its original December '99 release, and has been a family favorite ever since. A lot to love about this film. The casting of celebrated dramatic actors as frustrated TV quote-unquote has-beens, the physical quirks and vocal patterns used to portray the octopus-shaped aliens acclimatizing to their human forms. And a substantial special effects budget, including creature design by Stan Winston Studios. Stan Winston,
Nice.
one of the greats. The man who made the Terminator skeletons look fucking menacing instead of goofy. But our favorite secret sauce is the performance of the late actor Robin Sachs, who brings a real gravitas and believability to the villainous Ceres, a murderous Grinch-like creature clothed in serious-looking battle armor. Without his menacing performance, I'd argue the film could not have worked. I agree, and one thing I didn't realize until I was watching this movie is this is just a PG. This is not a PG-13 movie, and I feel like if Ceres were played jokey and not like a credible threat, Ann's right, this movie kind of would have collapsed because, and man, they've got a pretty serious torture scene in this movie.
Yeah.
There's a decent amount of death and devastation, but the things that jumped out at me is there's a few lines where they overdubbed. Like Sigourney Weaver clearly says, well, fuck this, when she sees the the arbitrarily arduous path through the reactor core, and they overdub that, and there's someone else about someone got a shit turned into something less offensive. To the point where I paused and looked at my Amazon copy, like, did I buy the the Parents Watchdog Group edition of this film or what? But no, it's just a PG movie, which is interesting that they were able to do all the things, and this holds up very well as an adult film, and it has that menace despite the relaxed parental guidance.
I feel like that falls mostly in line with Star Trek. Like, Star Trek has some themes, I would say, that are maybe a little challenging for children, or a little too risque for children at times. But, Star Trek is not a show that uses a lot of cursing, or any that I can think of.
Up until recent days, Star Trek Picard's got fucks and then shits and...
Yeah, I'm talking about the original series.
Yeah.
That's not a show that did anything beyond a PG, maybe bleeding over into PG-13 occasionally, but I don't know, it works.
Yeah, although, man, watching that season 1, the penultimate episode with the invasive cockroach neck gill parasites, pretty fucking
Next
horrific.
Generation, yeah.
I wish that was PG. I wish I could see that coming as like the 12-year-old watching, because it scared the shit out of me. Before I forgot to do my standard shtick, which is kind of like break down the production and the casting and all that stuff. This movie is directed by Dean Parasot, who directed a lot of weird offbeat TV comedies back in like the 80s and 90s, like Monk, Northern Exposure, Curb Your Enthusiasm. He hasn't done a lot of Hollywood work, but he is attached, or he is the director of the upcoming Bill and Ted Face the Music, which will be out in a couple of weeks, which is an interesting little connection, because we're going to be talking about that pretty soon.
We are.
It was written by David Howard and Robert Gordon. It stars, of course, Tim Allen at the height of his Home Improvement fame. You know, he will later be the voice of Buzz Lightyear on Toy Story. Stars Sigourney Weaver, who, of course, is famously Ellen Ripley in the Aliens franchise. Alan Rickman, you know him from Love Actually, and Professor Snape from the Harry Potter franchise. Tony Shalhoub, appearing in Monk, Wings, and currently The Marvelous Miss Maisel. Sam Rockwell, who's been in a ton of shit. Moon, Charlie's Angels, The Green Mile. Jojo Rabbit had a really interesting offbeat kind of Nazi character in that film. Daryl Mitchell, which this seemed to be like his career launch vehicle, and then shortly after this film, he had a motorcycle accident which paralyzed him from the waist down, which slowed down his career, but he's been doing a lot of advocacy for disabled people, and I guess has been in a recurring role since like the season 2 or 3 of Fear the Walking Dead. Bad news for him, because that almost ensures that I'll never see it. See his work, but also Enrico Colantoni, who had a fairly memorable role in the back half of this last season of Westworld, season 3. Rainn Wilson. Rainn Wilson's debut performance, because he's more famous from The Office. And also Missy Pyle, who I always enjoy when I see her. She's kind of like my definition of quirky, comedic actor, and she's been in Big Fish, 50 First Dates, Dodgeball, very great in Dodgeball, and The Artist. It's funny because we talked a lot about how this film is affectionate love letter and not like Spaceballs. And apparently Harold Ramis was supposed to direct this film, and he was taking it very far down the Spaceballs route by all accounts. That he wanted to be a lot more jokey and a lot more, laughing at rather than laughing with. And it all fell apart because he wanted to there's a big dispute about who to cast as the central role. He wanted Alec Baldwin, someone more serious, actiony, and with less comic roles, and he wasn't able to get that done, so he exited. Then came in Dean Parasite, which has that kind of like offbeat, quirky directorial background, and he crushed it. Him and the writing team just crushed it. So I would normally not say that it was an upgrade to lose the great late Harold Ramis, but it might have saved this project.
Yeah.
Or though I don't know. Maybe Spaceballs' take on Star Trek wouldn't be terrible either. Who knows?
I don't know. Spaceballs is a movie you watch twice. This is a movie you can watch over and over again. This is one of those movies that it's on television and you just leave it on, right?
It's very rewatch. I had that in my notes too. That like I've seen it 6 times in its entirety. I've probably seen it another 6 times because like, oh shit, this is the part where Tim Allen's about to fight the boulder monster. Well, hell, I got to stay here now,
Right, and then
this is the part
that scene's over, and you're like, well, the rest of it's so good, you just get caught up in it.
Right. You get, oh, here's Alan Rickman. He's about to unironically do the Grapthar's hammer. Like, oh, I got to stay for that. Like, it's there's no scene where you come in and like, oh yeah, this is the bad part of the movie. Because the other thing, it's brisk. It moves right along, an hour and 40 minutes. Packs a lot of plot and a lot of heart into those hour 40.
And they're able to not linger on one thing too long. They're always jumping from, you got this cast of characters, so they can jump from one neuroses to another. They can jump from one bit of action to an emotional moment. The pacing in this film is really, really good.
Yeah, and they have like every character has kind of, or at least most of them have an individual arc that tells the story of them transitioning from, an actor ironically being there for a paycheck versus an actor that's terrified to be there for real versus an actor discovering that they've got the right stuff. And, and the thing is, I really, like, we just mentioned Alan Rickman's Grapthar's hammer moment. The reason that works so well is because I don't think that Alan Rickman necessarily thought he would win that fight, or his character. It's more of just like, he got caught up in like, this guy died with me being his inspiration. How can I, how can I betray that memory? And if even I go and get myself killed, then it's no worse than this guy got. And Sam Rockwell has a similar kind of like, well, if I'm going to die as a red shirt, I want to die as a hero, not a coward.
With the Alexandra thing, it's kind of cool because it almost has like a Shakespearean epic, dramatic quality to it. The resolution of his character, and it makes sense within that character's world. His character crucially is a very classically trained Shakespearean type actor who got this job in this series thinking, oh, this will just be a job, and it turned into his life at some point, and he's sort of resentful of that. And so for him to turn around on that by the end is a big development in his character, but it also makes total sense.
Yeah. And it's funny because like I apparently Leonard Nimoy had a little bit of this in the late 70s where he's just like, yay Spock because it's made me wealthy and comfortable, but also boo Spock because I wanted to be a serious actor and I'll have all these projects that I want to do. And I can't because everyone sees me in like green makeup and ears. And he found, but then he found a way to channel that creativity in other directions. Like, he became a pretty accomplished director. He directed quite a bit of the good Star Treks. And also Alec Guinness. Alec Guinness famously is an asshole to Star Wars fans. Yeah. This is a great actor. He's been in Bridge Over the River Kwai. He's been in Lawrence of fucking Arabia. And all these sweaty nerds come up to him and want him to be their Obi-Wan mentor, and he's like, no, fuck off. I did this as a lark. I did this to pay the bills, you assholes. And do you think that actors are less resentful of being typecast nowadays, or do you think that there's a blueprint for like, well, you can try to avoid being typecast, and if you don't, you might as well embrace this because it's easy and it'll make you rich? Because I haven't heard of late many people being this obnoxious about roles to fans.
Is it maybe that fans are getting a little better as well, with separating the actor from the fiction?
Yeah, I think you're right, because
I don't think anybody thinks that Chris Pine is James Kirk or wants him to just be James Kirk forever.
Yeah, that might be it might be an interesting larger point, because like Ann Merin's talking about going these early cons, and I have a similar experience. I went to Starbase Indy in the late 80s. When I was like 12 or 13, and it was this, a couple, a floor and a couple ballrooms at the executive hotel at the Indianapolis airport. And I remember when I showed up realizing, because I was a nerd. I got made fun of a lot in school for being a Star Trek fan and being a religious nut job and all this other stuff. And I even remember thinking like, oh, wow, some of these people are more hopeless than me. I thought the Klingons were cool and the costume stuff and that, but like the people like manning the merch tables and the people who were buying merch, like, and it's like at a certain point you've got a critical threshold where, like, in a fandom, if all you have are off-putting weirdos, they drive the normal people out, and then you just have this cluster of off-putting weirdos. Hey, I can be friends with off-putting weirdos. I've got that gene. I'm like the day walker. I can hang in both crowds. But take a shower, at a con. Wear some deodorant, etc. But nowadays, like, I feel like fandom is kind of like the wall. Like, it's like the Berlin Wall being knocked down, and like people have like realized that it's okay to be a massive Star Wars nerd, and it's okay to be way into video games. Just like it's always been okay to be really fucking ridiculous about your sports fandom.
Right.
Like you can paint your body orange with blue nipples and be stripped down to the waist in 30 below weather, and that's okay, but God forbid you wear a stormtrooper helmet. People like, no, that's all. So now, like, it's more inclusive. Like, the fandom's not quite as obsessed, and it's not quite as like downward spiral. So maybe we as fans have gotten better about punishing actors like that. But I don't know, man. You see some of this stuff that's happened in the recent Star Wars movies where people don't agree with certain casting and certain roles, and then they fucking hound people off social media. So maybe,
okay, maybe I'm just not the social media person that I should be, or that modern society requires me to be, because I do see that happening a lot. Social media is kind of just like that amplifying voice of awful. Around a lot of things, but in this case, before social media became what it is today, I didn't feel like people were doing the same kinds of things that they do now, as far as gatekeeping, and just like, because I am a kid of the 90s. Like, I was born in 82, so the 90s is when I was really like watching a lot of Star Trek stuff, both original series, Next Generation, and certainly in my friend circle, it was very popular. But even if you go to the fringes of it, it wasn't.
We were all off-putting weirdos, though, Jim. I don't know if you realize that.
Well, I try not to be, but it happens. You grow up in a cult, you're going to be an off-putting weirdo.
Right.
But even when I get out to like work environments, where there are definitely not off-putting weirdos in every cubicle. People, you talk about Star Trek and everybody's like, oh yeah, and maybe they're not the level of fan you are, but they don't. I didn't feel like in the 2000s that people were looking down on me for that stuff.
For sure.
In the same ways that, like, I think people in the 60s and 70s might have been, oh, you guys are weird, and probably straight into the 80s too. But then, it's kind of come back around in this weird gatekeeping environment we live in on social media.
Yeah, and I guess now that I'm thinking about, like, it used to be the actors would be victims of like misplaced and way overboard love. And we've been able to handle that as a fandom. And now what we have to worry about is like the vicious hate for people that we hate. Like, you know, sometimes it's like just because you don't like the character. Sometimes it's because the character is designed to be hated, you know, like the guy who played Joffrey. You know, people being, so it's like we've learned to separate the love, like, oh, you know, Bill Shatner is not Kirk, Leonard Nimoy was not Spock, but we haven't learned to separate the hate, maybe like Jack Gleason.
Yeah, that sucks.
Not Joffrey. So
It's also a question of like how many people are actually doing this. If you see 1,000 people on Twitter hate bombing Jackie Gleason, because that is his name, right?
I think it's Jack Gleason.
Jack Gleason.
Right?
Yeah. I don't think it's exactly the same as the Honeymooners actor, but
no. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's Jack Gleason. If you see 1,000 people on Twitter hate bombing him because they don't like Joffrey, you got to remember there are 10 to 100 million people watching this show. And so the vast majority of them are not doing that, right?
Right. But for Jack Gleason, it does feel like the world's coming down on him.
Absolutely.
And like if once or twice a week someone on the street's like, fuck you, Joffrey, you know, that's not just like it's not fun to be mobbed by people all the time for wanting your autograph and wanting to have a personal interaction. You just want to have dinner with your family. Like it's both sides of the coin are fucking, you know, opposite of crazy is still crazy.
Yeah.
So I thought this all this stuff is really cool because, you know, when you see these characters hating on Tim Allen, it's because the original cast of Star Trek hates Bill Shatner. I think a lot of them have warmed up, and the ones that haven't are probably dead now. But like, I guess he did some really diva shit, you know, insisted. I was reading some behind the scenes stuff this morning about like Bill Shatner insisting lighting gets changed on the set. So the spotlight was on him. That like when Leonard Nimoy started really blowing up because of, you know, the popularity of Spock, that he started requesting rewrites to minimize his character and to maximize, you know, famously anytime Kirk could take his shirt off, he would take his shirt off. If he's got a fist fight or if he's on an alien, like, you know, that battle damage, that shirt gets peeled right off. There is elements of that. And the thing is like, I don't know, because they play Tim Allen's character as if he's just obtuse, like he just doesn't understand the way he acts is off-putting. I don't know that I believe that about William Shatner, who I love, but like, you know, he probably was a real dick to work with in the 60s. Because I don't know, he's kind of megalomaniacal.
Yeah, I mean, it's ego, and I think it's a little bit of you know, in the acting profession, you can be in 1 minute and completely out the next minute, is my impression of it. And so
you don't see it coming.
Right. And so I feel like those types of behaviors are reflective of a insecurity about like just your career, because it is kind of inherently insecure. So, and
it is a zero-sum game a little bit, like fan affection, you know? Like,
and think of how many people are vying for those roles, right? How many people would have loved to be Captain Kirk if Shatner didn't continue to, you know, serve in some way.
Right. And the writers read the fan mail too. Like, you know, in season 1, Spock blows up. Season 2, they start writing scenes for him. And, you know, since it is, you got 43 minutes of television. If Spock gets 20, suddenly Kirk's, you know, only getting 15. So I definitely see, it's just the same reason. Like I'm watching, in my free time, this Michael Jordan documentary, and Michael Jordan similarly just maniacally focused on winning and didn't give a shit who he hurt in the process, because sports similarly zero-sum game. If you're winning, someone else got to be losing, and you know, you don't want the loser to be you. So there's a lot of this like highly competitive, ego-driven. It is funny though, because I always think, like, you know, Michael Jordan, one of the greatest athletes of all time. Muhammad Ali, same kind of ego-driven, greatest boxer of all time. Bill Shatner,
greatest actor of all time. I mean,
undisputed, right? He's right up there at the Brandos and the that's
certainly one of the greatest captains of a starship of all time.
He does a thing, and I enjoy the thing he does, but it is funny that he's got this overdeveloped ego. You know. I guess that's what makes it so. That's what makes it so funny. Probably also the thing that makes it so maddening to be his co-star. Like, you know, the temptation to be like, look, dude, You know, this ain't Shakespeare, and you're not fucking Hamlet out here. Let's just, you're, if anything, a ham. Let's tone this thing down.
Yeah, it's like Alexander's character. You know, he recognizes the somewhat silly nature of what they're doing in this film, right? Of the Galaxy Quest show. But yeah, I don't know. Bill Shatner is an interesting character.
Mm-hmm. And I guess a lot of the other things that you know, that they had in this, like Sigourney Weaver's character being upset that she finally gets a TV Guide interview and they spent 6 paragraphs talking about how her breasts get squeezed in uniform, comes from a real life story by Jerry Ryan, who, you know, blew up in Star Trek Voyager because she has a fucking pneumatic body, and they put her in a literally sprayed on costume, and TV Guide did do that to her.
Mm-hmm.
So
I remember. How could you grow up in the 90s as a teen child, a teen boy, and not remember Jerry Ryan?
I mean, that's a testament to why, you know, we got a lot of flack for not being huge Voyager fans or seeing all of Voyager, because I watched the first 2, probably even most of the 3rd season. I stopped watching despite the fact that every week I could show up and see Jerry Ryan looking like that, because the show is just bad.
Yeah.
But I don't know. There's the other scenes like that work on a lot of different levels, or like I love when Tim Allen, you know, still thinks that he is doing some kind of fan project with these aliens that show up, and that's like what's great about this is the aliens show up at maybe the worst possible time on the day that he's doing this fan junket, this convention. But then I was thinking, like, when would a good time be? Because you show up at any point in this person's life dressed like they do, talking like them, and you're going to think it's a bit.
Yeah.
You know, like he might have been more open to playing along since he was in this kind of fan. Whereas, like, if it'd been a week since the last convention and they just show up at his house, he's like, fucking get out of here. I'm calling the cops.
Yeah. They find him at the Starbucks and try and pull this, you know.
But all the actors that play the aliens, especially Enrico Colantoni, does such a good job when, you know, he shows up hungover on the bridge, and he's supposed to do this delicate peace negotiation with this galactic badass Saris, and he's just like hasn't been listening to the backstory. Just like, you know what, give him all the blue cannons, shoot the red cannons at him, give him a little taste of the gravitonic torpedoes, and all right, that should do it. And the looks on the aliens' faces when all this is happening is just priceless. I love the way they, in the second act, kind of like thread that needle between the very real nature of what's happening versus the actor's delusion of it. And it just works so well.
Super high stakes for them, no stakes for him. Okay, I have a question. So I get that this is a parody, but I'm looking for, like, the question marks. When he walks onto the bridge of that ship and he starts just, you know, chugging soda and just giving flippant orders and not a care in the world, what does he think he is here for? Is this just, does he, because I think he thinks he's filming something, but if he were filming something, he wouldn't be acting like that. He'd be acting, right?
But yeah, so they mentioned something about some fan project that he's got the commitment to the next day, which I think he thinks this is, but that, I mean.
But what is the fan? So it's just like, I'm going to show up and do a public appearance kind of thing?
Or like, do you know when they did the Star Trek old series reboot, and someone like built like a replica of the bridge of the Enterprise, and they casted the
They've
whole,
done
like,
a lot of these.
Like imagine if those guys reached out to Bill Shatner and got him to appear as an admiral and just like walk on.
Well,
and,
they
like,
did get Walter Koenig.
and
I'm pretty sure he did a better job than this.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, that's like the parody aspect of it, is imagine this guy who's so self-important that these people spend all this, like, if it's just what he thinks it is, these people spend all this time and money and love to build this replica of his ship and want him to just do like a scene or two, and he doesn't bother to do costuming, makeup, just goes in there and makes a mockery of it. Like, but that's his consistent behavior, like, to all the fans. Although I guess that's the one thing that kind of is weird, is that they try to do it both ways, where he plays like the Bill Shatner He plays Bill Shatner's side of like on Saturday Night Live, telling friends to or fans to get a life and move out of their mother's basement. But he also is the guy who likes to show up at these things and get the cheers.
Yeah. And they play it all, and he's the guy who
Right.
doesn't really care about the fan events unless they're big fan events, right? Like this convention. A few fans. He's not going to try to impress 1,000 fans. Yeah,
And even then, he shows up late and he makes other
right.
people wait, and he's not very professional about it. But I think it works because it works in both directions, because you've got these aliens who are fans that their lives are depending on it. And then you've got these other conventional terrestrial Star Trek nerds whose lives, quote unquote, also depend on interaction with this guy, and he treats them both with this like cavalier callousness. This he takes it for granted.
He does, yeah.
And I think that's what. And I wonder, because I guess they don't really explain that very well. Like, I understand Alan Rickman's character, like he's been typecast and he can't do anything, and he's kind of like almost desperate for work, whereas Jason, the character Tim Allen plays, seems like he's got this nice mansion in Malibu, and but he still shows up to this stuff. Like I said, I think that's some of the stuff where the conceit, you just have to kind of go with it, because it is a little contradictory. It's rare that an actor would do both of those things, like be well off, and because Bill Shatner, he shows up to Star Trek cons, but I bet he gets paid a bunch, and they're not.
Yeah.
They're not the Starbase Indies back in the early 80s at the cheap hotel at the Indianapolis airport. He shows up for the big stuff.
No, it's interesting to me. Like, Anne was talking about going to this convention when she was very young, and having seen Chaos on the Bridge, I'm kind of glad we did these in this order, because Chaos on the Bridge sort of gave me a better understanding of what was directing the whole convention thing. Like, it was Gene Roddenberry's interactions with the fans, right? They'd write him letters and he would send letters back. He was almost more focused, it seemed at times in the 80s, on that than on the actual show he was making, right? On the community, right. on engaging with the fans. And I think that's the Star Trek is kind of what made sci-fi conventions. Even down to the modern era, as I understand it, like, it has defined the science fiction convention. And I think Gene Roddenberry had a large part to play in that, not just by creating the series, but also encouraging those sort of interactions within the fan communities.
Yeah, I wonder if any other show would have been big enough to sustain that community during the thirsty periods where you didn't have a lot of sci-fi. Like, could Buck Rogers,
right?
Would the Buck Rogers? Because I know at the Star Trek conventions you always had like the Buck Rogers booths, and you also had the what was it, like some of the obscure British shit, like Galaxy 1999 or something like that, or you had Battlestar Galactica, like those guys would be making appearances in the margins of it. But like, were any of those individually big enough to sustain something the way Star Trek was? Because Star Trek kind of barely got the job done. Again, it's like, these cons weren't like big money, but they were enough to kind of keep the flame alive. Just like, I guess similar to Star Wars fandom, where a few like novels and comic books and video games were enough to sustain the passion before Star Wars became big again. Kind of kept that stuff alive. And
that's the next stage, is like, you look at this movie and you look at the kind of convention they're putting on here. That has changed in the last 20 years. Conventions are just enormous. You look at things like board gaming conventions, which is sort of a subset, an offshoot of, and they've been around forever, probably longer than sci-fi conventions, honestly. But they're huge. They're, tens of thousands of people, not 1,000 sweaty nerds packing into a single conference room in a hotel. This is renting out half the fucking conference space in major metropolitan areas for a full week,
Yeah.
So it kind of almost looks quaint what they're doing here in Galaxy Quest now.
Yeah, it's like something. You're right, because like, Cincinnati has like 3 or 4 different comic cons and science fiction festivals, and we're just a mid-sized Midwestern town.
Yeah.
So like, I'm sure there's places in the country where it is a pretty barren just because there's nobody that lives there. Like I don't know if there's a leading sci-fi con in North Dakota, probably. But like, yeah, this felt like just before like all this, this is because this came out in '99. I mean, that's right.
Yeah.
As the special editions had just come out, and is right as the prequels are coming out, and the Lord of the Rings came out, and then the Star Trek reboots came out, and then like nowadays these things are multi-million-dollar affairs and they get big names. But like, like at the I can't remember who the Starbase. Like I think the guy that played Montgomery Scott, I think that was the big name that anchored the Starbase Indy, which was a pretty big get. James Doohan, right. Which is a pretty big get for the time, but like, I've seen multiple times where they get the entire bridge crew of like Star Trek The Next Generation at like Dragon Con and stuff, and like that it was just unheard of at the time.
Or like Game of Thrones, where you get like the major actors. It's not we got a couple of people who agreed to do this semi-shameful thing. Now it's pop culture. Speaking of pop culture, I want to talk about some of the careers in retrospect here of some of these actors, because Sigourney Weaver was already very big by the time this movie came out.
Sure.
She'd been in the Aliens films and Ghostbusters and all kinds of things that people knew her for. Tim Allen had an enormous career on television up to this point. 99 is the year that Home Improvement went off the air. I don't know about your family. I was not allowed to watch a lot of the sitcoms that were on television at the time. Like Seinfeld was right out, and I know Seinfeld kind of went off the air a little bit before this, but Friends was a little too risque for my family's tastes. And so Home Improvement was like just the speed that we were allowed to watch. It was like the the PG-13-ish of sitcoms in the 90s. And Tim Allen was big in the Jones household, let me tell you.
Same. Home Improvement was definitely, especially the earlier seasons. I think we, that was something kind of the American experience. Like it was, most people abandoned a show before it went off the air because like they would always just run a show into the ground.
Sure.
But those early seasons of Home Alone,
Home Improvement,
Home Improvement really were really funny. Yeah.
I liked him. Wanted to be Jonathan Taylor Thomas, all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
Wilson
Tiger
was a great gimmick.
Poster boy of the month, almost every single month.
Absolutely, and he's the voice of Simba in The Lion King. Like,
damn straight.
Pretty strong young career. Not so much anymore. I don't know what he's been in. But I mean,
what has he been in?
I couldn't tell you, man. Like I lost track of him sometime in the late 90s or mid to late 90s. But yeah, I mean, Wilson was a great gimmick. I don't know, that and Boy Meets World were kind of my number 1 and 2 of that era. But Tim Allen was, a big star and a movie star at this point. Like he had done, you mentioned Buzz Lightyear, that was 95. He had done, is it the Santa Claus? Did he do the Santa Claus before this? I think he did.
I don't know. He had a couple that I think were around
that was 94.
This period, like Wild Hogs. He was in with John Travolta. Did you ever get to see that fucking train wreck?
That's the motorcycle movie where he rides across country or something as like a
City Slickers only with motorcycles.
Midlife crisis. No, I hadn't seen that, but this was maybe the last good movie he was in aside from the Toy Story movies, because from here on, it's just a downward spiral. I think for Tim Allen, if I'm looking through his discography.
Yeah, when I think of Tim Allen, I think of this. I think of Home Improvement. I think of Toy Story. And then he's got this new show that I think just got canceled this year or Last Man Standing or whatever.
Yeah, I heard that's big. I don't watch it.
I don't watch much network television either. But
I mean, after this, he did like Joe Somebody and just like a whole bunch of things that I feel were better serviced by like Larry the Cable Guy than him.
Santa Claus, yeah, sure.
Yeah, he had like this if you've seen Home Improvement, you understand the image of Tim Allen, right? And he carried that
Mhm.
into basically everything he did. I will say I don't think the Santa Claus movies are awful. I've seen the first two. The first one is probably the best, as is usually the case.
No kidding. Yeah. I haven't
uh,
seen either of the first two. I saw the last one, which
oh,
was fucking wild.
why? Why would
Had
you
an
do that to
evil
yourself?
has an evil mecha like Hitler Santa Claus robot that tries to take it's got Martin Short playing.
Oh,
Yeah, but that's
ugh.
one with Martin Short in it. Who's you and I kind of have a checkered history with him.
Not a huge fan of
Um,
Martin Short.
he's the funniest man that I don't find funny, I think.
Yeah, and then some of the other notable. Everybody's kind of notable, but notable firsts in this film are Rainn Wilson and Justin Long. Both of them having their
Right.
debut. Justin Long actually, I don't think had been in anything up till this point. I think Rainn Wilson might have done like a short or something.
Some a TV show, yeah. But this was
TV,
his first feature film, yeah.
yeah. And they both went on to be pretty big stars. I mean,
I wonder why they switched Rainn Wilson out, because Rainn Wilson was like the alien in the primary group in the first act and a half, and then it shifted to this other dude that like I don't know why they didn't give Rainn Wilson the emotional thorough line with like Alan Rickman's character.
yeah, I don't know.
Because I feel like that would have, but I don't know. Maybe he was a brand new guy. He had like a line or two, and he's recognizable. Actually, he's
Yeah.
so young, and he's got this dopey alien haircut. He's almost unrecognizable. Because I
Uh huh.
remember in the lead up to this, you mentioned, because you saw this movie like a week or two before I did on your watch, and you mentioned that like, did you know Rainn Wilson's in this? I'm like, get the fuck out of here. And he's like, it's one of the aliens, and I was like mentally inventorying because there's like the four aliens you recognize. I'm
Right.
like, no, I almost thought you were full of shit because I thought you meant the Grapthar, by Grapthar's hammer, by the sons of Werner or whatever, you shall be avenged. And I'm like, that's
No,
kind of looks
that's
like
a
Rainn Wilson, but
kid
he's
in the
not.
hall, right?
Yes, 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 yes.
Uh,
But yeah, sure enough, he's there in the like his speaking line is in the limo where he's trying to give Tim Allen a briefing about this delicate intergalactic situation that's brewing.
yeah. Justin Long obviously playing the huge nerd who is kind of the leader of the nerds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He's the guy who holds the group together, and when the chips are down, he can bring everybody's knowledge to bear
Yeah.
on the problem.
He got very good scores in math. He's going to go to a pretty good university, and he's going to make so much bank in the .com explosion. And he's probably a soulless lackey or hanger on of Bezos and Musk to this day.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah, I can see it.
if he hasn't been taken down by some kind of vicious sex scandal.
It is crazy though, just to see the beginnings of their careers because they're so well known now.
I think Alan Rickman is so good at playing this kind of like actor who's just like his famous catchphrase is like razor blades coming out of his vocal cords. It's very shades of Paul Giamatti. I'm not going to drink a fucking Merlot from Sideways.
Yeah.
And then the next smash cut to him like choking down Merlot. But his line reading of them cutting the ribbon at this new supermarket by Grapthar's hammer. What a savings. It's just so funny. And also he's kind of an asshole in the same way that Tim Allen's character is, because he's not giving the fans what they want. He's letting his personal issues and bitterness get in the way of, doing this performance. But god damn, he's so funny. And when he's running around late stage as, after he's kind of fully embraced his destiny and his headpiece, it's I think it's almost intentional that like when his headpiece is immaculate and he wears it and you never see him out of it in the whole fucking film.
Yeah.
But when he unironically embraces his destiny as this Spock-like alien, his headpiece gets shredded and you can see his hair sticking out of it. I feel it's like one of those intentional like Beauty and the Beast, like the handsome heroic figure is the villain and the bestial scary monster is the good guy. Like Alan Rickman, when he's made up to look immaculately like this alien, is not at all that character. And then when he's all fucking shredded and you can see the artifice, that's when the hero comes out. I thought that was and It's funny as hell, and also it's holding up the narrative.
Yeah, I do wonder what the people at the convention that they land in afterwards think when they see him, torn and shredded. I don't know. I assume they think it's just part of the show, but
Yeah, when that one dude gets vaporized by a real phaser. I mean, this is like, man, this is some pyrotechnic shit. This is some crazy stuff.
One of my favorite scenes is where they're fighting Garignac. Like, Taggart's gone down to the planet and there's this rock monster and he's fighting it and they're trying to beam him out the whole time. But, it requires very precise controls and they've never done this before because there doesn't exist a machine on Earth that could do this. And the trying to transport this pig and it just going sideways is just one of the funniest scenes in the whole movie to me.
Right. And it's also like an homage to a memorable scene in the motion picture where they have like the rare the transporter malfunction that McCoy's always dreading and someone gets splanched or whatever, cross beamed and dies screaming. Like that's really great. I also love the Laredo taking her out. Like there's that scene you see, like that's like in the first two Star Trek films, it's like 15 minutes of the running time for both of them. Like Sulu taking it out, and then Savick taking him out in a second, and it's always these like long, majestic gliding shots of the Enterprise. And here it's that until you realize, oh, this kid not only does he remember how to play this shit from 20 years ago, but he was like 12 when he was like, Wesley Crusher, having to actually flip a polarized Broussard ram scoop and save the day, and he just like that whole cringing, like he's just rubbing the
scraping.
It's just scraping for so long and you're cringing so hard. I love that scene. And then the aliens still, like, once they get free from Doc, they're still cheering because this is the greatest moment in their lives. So
and of course, they have some ridiculous but fun action scenes. Those the choppers or whatever, that Sigourney Weaver says, I'm absolutely not going to do this. It's a great, hilarious moment for her character, but also decent action scene. Like the effects on this thing are pretty good. They're
this is
cheesy,
unironically, it's unironically Sean Connery in The Rock. It's the exact same fucking scene. Him rolling, going through those terrifying boiler sequences. Yeah, it's the same thing. I love Sam Rockwell realizing that he's a red shirt beaming down to a dangerous alien planet and being correct about spotting all of the sci-fi dangers. Like, oh, these cute alien babies, they're going to be somehow terrifying monsters. There's going to be 10,000 more of them than you think they see. Man, Sam Rockwell is a very enormously entertaining actor. Like, can go from this massive swagger to this total abject coward in 30 seconds, and believable in both.
Fantastic. And I've seen him in so many different roles. He plays a lot of bad guys, and I think he's somewhat of a bad guy in this movie. I mean, he's clearly like a womanizer or whatever.
It's true. He's looking for starfuckers, and he's only too happy to
in a
give
sort
someone
of
their 50 minutes
way.
Of fame, maybe 5 minutes of fame, maybe a minute of fame.
But I've seen him, play con men in Matchstick Men. I've seen him play. I don't want to spoil it too much, but Moon is a great movie with Sam Rockwell in it. In the lead role and one of the only roles. He's quietly like one of my favorite actors because he's just so versatile and so understated in his performances, but sometimes he busts it out. Like in this movie, he's really goofy.
He's a terrifying scum of the earth character in The Green Mile. He's like the worst of the dregs of humanity. Oh God, he's terrible in that film. I mean, he's wonderful, but he plays like and then I like it that sometimes he like does the flip. Like the first role I saw him in was Charlie's Angels, where he plays like the person the protagonist is working for, and then it turns out he's the big bad in the whole film. And like you said, he's effortless at playing both of those roles.
Yeah.
So he's really good at he's really good in that. I also love the separation of the command deck. This is like the defining thing of the Enterprise D, and they play homage to that as the bridge separates from the rest of the ship. I thought that was really cool. In fact, one of the things, I guess I never realized this as many times I've seen this movie, but the Protector is the opposite of the Enterprise. The Enterprise always having this very large round command section and this very long and pointy engine section.
Yeah.
And the Protector has this long kind of like nacelle shaped command section. And then its nacelles are these big round spheroid kind of things. Which like, I guess, like, do you have any more things you want to talk about the movie? Because I want to get into like the trivia, the loving homages that they've included. And that was one of them. Like, you got to know Star Trek to spoof it that well that you have this. And the Protector's a badass looking ship. It's a legitimately cool starship, but it's also the opposite from Federation construction. And I just fucking love it.
Well, that's the interesting thing about this movie. Like you said, I can't remember if we said it on the podcast or before, but it had a $45 million budget, made 90 million worldwide, but 45 million bucks, kind of all hits the screen. Like I see it, the effects are really good. They have those kind of hero shots of their version of the Enterprise, the Protector. But this is one place where I feel like it really let me down. That saucer separation was one of the lamest things I've seen in cinema, period. They could have done so much more with this, because when the Enterprise separates, they linger on it, right? In this, they just kind of like hit it for a second and done. Like, I wanted more from that scene. I wanted a lot more from that scene.
I gotcha. It's tough because in the context of the film, they're just trying to wrap up. I mean, it's happening in the climax, and it's like a multi-stage climax. You've got like several false endings before you get to the actual ending.
That Omega, what is it called?
The Omega 13 device.
Omega 13. Yeah, you don't see them using that until the very, very end of this thing. Right. You almost forget about it existing.
Yeah, you've got the dragging minds defeat the bad guy, then the reveal that the bad guy's got his final revenge, then the Omega 13 that wipes it out, then the fact that you can't stop because you've slungshot through a black hole and you're going to crash into the earth, then the ejection of the, like, all these are the climax, but it just kind of like, this movie's having it's having the orgasm of its life. This climax is lasting 10, 15 minutes. And it doesn't really kind of go into denouement until they land and in the convention.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of like I said, loving tributes in this film. For example, Sam Rockwell's character Guy is an intentional homage to this Star Trek: The Next Generation bit player Guy Vardaman, who plays a no-name extra in like every season of the film. He's always in the background, or he's like a helmsman when they didn't have a helmsman. He was Brent Spiner's photo double for the entire run, and he also, I guess, did like was the camera double for Wesley Crusher. And this was like just an homage to his kind of like recurring bit character.
How does that work? Were they the same height? In what season? Like,
yeah. I don't know. I guess
wild.
He was Brent Spiners for the entire thing. Maybe Wesley Crusher, but I don't know. Is Brent Spiners not that tall?
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look and see if there was a season where they were about the same height, because you kind of have to be.
Because like Michael Dorn and Jonathan Frakes are very tall. Like they're 6'2", 6'3", somewhere around that. Everybody like Patrick Stewart's and the rest of the crew is in like the 5'8" range, like kind of normal American male height. And I always thought Will Wheaton was pretty tall for. Anyway,
I don't know.
They also the Thermians say they're they come from the Klaatu Nebula, which is really a nod back to the Day to Earth Stood Still, one of the foundational science fiction films.
Okay. Not the Keanu Reeves version.
No, well, I mean, to the extent that his main character's name's Klaatu, which I'm sure it is. Why would they change that? It's iconic. Also, like Justin Long, we watched Flight of the Navigator, 3 years ago? as part of like a live watch thing we did on Twitch.
Yeah.
Justin Long's running out of his parents' home with the armful of fireworks to guide an alien ship in for a landing was written as a deliberate homage to that scene.
Nice.
I thought that was really cool. And also, I did not know this, but they were actually planning a sequel. They're going to have Galaxy Quest 2, and they folded production when Alan Rickman suddenly and tragically died 4 years ago.
Damn.
But I guess they were like full steam ahead, barreling down to do a remake, which I would have been all in for. In fact, I still in like I think you can figure out a way just and maybe that's one of the things. Like I think you could have a poignant through note and like because late in life Bill Shatner and Leonard Nimoy became unironic friends, and it would be interesting to revisit that. Like you had this rivalry and you kind of hated each other's guts, and then you kind of warmed up to each other working as actor and director in the various movies. And then what do you do when your most iconic screen star is dead and he's no longer on the con scene with you? I think that could be part of the movie if they did it right. But then again, I don't know. Tim Allen's getting pretty long in the tooth at this point.
And I'd be scared. I'm always scared of sequels, but this movie is so good that I don't know if they could make anything better.
Right. And
maybe they could, but trying is super risky.
But you find that, like I said, if you find that heart, because that's what this movie has a lot of. It's not just a spoof. It's not a mockery. It's got its own story that it wants to tell. And I think there are some bones that could put some meat even without Alan Rickman, as great as he is.
I don't know. This movie feels like a weird anachronism. It's not even an anachronism. It's just like it doesn't feel like other movies. It feels like there's almost too much love in this movie for it to exist in a weird way. Like I feel very warm and fuzzy watching this movie as a Star Trek fan, and I don't get that from so many other productions that try and do similar things.
Yeah, I think the PG does a lot of that too, because this film feels very wholesome. Even when it's got like Sigourney Weaver's cleavage on full display, and there's clearly some like tawdry things happening in the margins, it just is relentlessly, wholesome. Everyone's doing the right thing for the right reasons. The main protagonist, the aliens themselves, are completely guileless and kind of like Christ-like. It's a real wholesome film. So, all right, that's going to do it for our coverage here of Galaxy Quest. Thank you very much to Ann Merin for commissioning this podcast. If you would like to force us to, in this case, very much enjoy about 2 to 3 hours of audiovisual entertainment, you can do that. Go to support.baldmove.com. There's a link to commission a podcast. You can check it out there. And we've got, I think, 3 projects in the works right now. But if you'd like to put your hat in the ring, just go to support.baldmove.com, and there's directions there. Put your money where your internet mouth is, your virtual mouth, your cyber mouth.
That's what they say.
Put your real money where your cyber mouth is at support.baldmove.com, and we will commission. You will commission us to do something. Yeah, that's how it works. Again, thanks to Ann Merin for these 2 delightful Star Trek flavored commissions. We really enjoyed doing them, and we appreciate all your support. So that's it for us. That's it for us on Galaxy Quest. Until the next time here on Bald Move Pulp, I'm Aaron.
And I'm Jim.
Live long and prosper by Grapthar's hammer.